The screaming started at 0347 hours, station time. Commander Jake Morrison was halfway through his morning coffee when the emergency klaxons pierced the artificial dawn of Vega Station's main hub. Through the observation deck's reinforced transparent steel, he watched cargo ships scatter like frightened birds as something massive emerged from the asteroid field. "All hands to battle stations!" The announcement echoed through corridors where 3,000 souls lived and worked on humanity's furthest outpost. Unknown hostile approaching. This is not a drill. Jake's hands moved with practiced efficiency, sealing his coffee bulb and heading for the command center. 20 years of military service had taught him to compartmentalize fear, but what he saw on the tactical displays made his blood run cold. The creature was unlike anything in the xenobiology databases. 30 meters of crystalline carapace caught starlight like a prism, refracting it into deadly beams that had already disabled 2 patrol ships. 8 limbs moved with terrifying grace through the vacuum, each ending in razor-sharp talons that could shred hull plating like paper. Most disturbing were the eyes, 7 of them, arranged in a crown-like pattern, each glowing with an inner fire that seemed to burn with malevolent intelligence. "It's heading straight for us," reported Lieutenant Torres, her voice tight with barely controlled panic. Estimated time to contact, 12 minutes. The defense grid came online, particle beams and missile batteries tracking the approaching nightmare. Jake watched the tactical display update in real time, calculating firing solutions and evacuation routes. Standard protocol demanded he order the evacuation of non-essential personnel, but where could they go? The nearest safe harbor was 3 days away at maximum burn. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission," the communications officer announced, his face pale. It's not using any known communication protocol." The speakers crackled with sounds that human ears weren't designed to process, a mixture of crystalline chimes and deep, resonant harmonics that seemed to bypass the eardrums and vibrate directly in their bones. Several crew members staggered, clutching their heads as the alien song washed over them. Jake gritted his teeth against the psychic assault. "Cut the feed!" But before the officer could comply, something extraordinary happened. The chaotic sounds began to resolve into patterns, and within those patterns, Jake heard something impossible. Sorrow. Not the alien rage he'd expected, but a deep, aching loneliness that transcended species barriers. "Belay that order," he said quietly, raising his hand. "Let it through." The bridge fell silent, except for the haunting alien melody. Jake closed his eyes and listened, really listened, trying to understand what message lay hidden within the inhuman voice. There was intelligence here, yes, but also desperation. A plea wrapped in terror's clothing. "Sir, the creature has stopped. Its approach," Torres reported, her voice filled with confusion. "It's just hovering there." Jake opened his eyes and looked at the tactical display. The massive form had indeed halted its advance, floating motionless against the starfield. Those 7 burning eyes seemed to be focused directly on the station. "Waiting. Stand down, weapons," Jake ordered. "Sir?" Torres's voice cracked with disbelief. "You heard me. Stand down all weapons. And open a channel, full spectrum, all frequencies." Jake stepped forward, his decision crystallizing with absolute certainty. "I want to talk to it." The crew exchanged worried glances, but years of discipline held. As the weapons powered down, Jake found himself face to face with humanity's first contact, and perhaps its last hope of avoiding a war they couldn't win. The silence stretched between species like a held breath. Jake stood before the main viewer, watching those 7 alien eyes regard him with an intensity that made his skin crawl. Behind him, the bridge crew maintained their stations with professional calm, but he could feel their tension like a physical weight. One wrong word, one misinterpreted gesture, and Vega Station would become humanity's tombstone. "Computer, initiate Universal Translation Protocol," he commanded. "Full linguistic analysis of the incoming transmission." The station's AI began processing the alien song, breaking it down into component frequencies and mathematical relationships. Minutes passed as quantum processors worked to find patterns that might bridge the gap between human and alien cognition. "Translation matrix incomplete," the computer announced in its maddeningly neutral tone. "Insufficient data for meaningful interpretation." Jake wasn't surprised. First contact protocols assumed they'd meet species that communicated through recognizable methods, electromagnetic radiation, chemical signals, even telepathic emanations. But this creature's song operated on principles that challenged human understanding of communication itself. "Sir, it's moving again," Torres warned. The massive form began a slow rotation, presenting different aspects of its crystalline body to the station. Jake realized it was displaying itself, showing them the intricate patterns carved into its carapace, the way light refracted through its translucent sections, the graceful articulation of its limbs. "It's trying to tell us something," he murmured. Dr. Lisa Park, the station's xenobiologist, had arrived on the bridge during the tense standoff. Now she stepped forward, her scanner active. "Commander, I'm detecting complex electromagnetic patterns emanating from its neural cluster. The frequency variations correspond to emotional states in several known species." Emotional states? Fear, sadness, hope. Park's eyes widened as she read her instruments. "Commander, I don't think this is an attack. I think it's asking for help." The alien song changed, becoming more urgent. Through the viewer, they watched as the creature's movements became increasingly erratic. One of its limbs hung at an odd angle, and dark fluid, blood perhaps, leaked from wounds along its side. Jake made a decision that would either save his station or doom it. "Open a channel. Full broadcast." "Channel open, sir." Jake took a deep breath and spoke to the void. "This is Commander Jake Morrison of Vega Station, representing the United Earth Coalition. If you can understand me, we want to help. Please respond if you comprehend this message." The alien song stopped abruptly. For a moment, Jake thought he'd made a fatal error. Then, with agonizing slowness, the creature began to emit new sounds. Careful, deliberate patterns that the computer immediately began analyzing. "Commander," the AI announced, "the entity is attempting to replicate human vocal patterns. Linguistic matrix updating." What emerged from the speakers next would haunt Jake's dreams for years to come. It was still clearly alien, harmonics, and frequencies no human throat could produce. But underneath the otherworldly tones was something unmistakably familiar. The cadence of human speech. "Help." The word was distorted, stretched across multiple octaves but recognizable. "Please. Help." The bridge fell into stunned silence. Torres crossed herself, whispering a prayer in Spanish. Park's scanner trembled in her hands as she recorded everything. "Help is coming," Jake said, his voice steady despite the hammering of his heart. "Can you tell us what's wrong? Are you injured?" The creature's response came in waves of harmonized sound that gradually resolved into broken English. "Hurt. Inside hurt. So long alone. So very alone." Park grabbed Jake's arm. "Commander, look at this." Her scanner displayed a complex energy pattern. "It's not just communicating, it's broadcasting its own neural patterns. We're hearing its thoughts directly, filtered through its attempt to speak our language." The full implications hit Jake like a physical blow. This wasn't just first contact. It was first contact with a being in agony, reaching across the vast gulf between species to beg for help from creatures it had never met. "What hurt you?" Jake asked gently. "Who made you alone?" The answer came in a torrent of alien anguish that needed no translation. Images flooded their minds, a world of crystal cities, beings of living light dancing through prismatic halls, and then darkness, fire, death. The systematic destruction of an entire civilization, and at the center of it all, one survivor, fleeing through the stars, carrying wounds that went far deeper than flesh. The visions came in fragments, transmitted through the creature's desperate attempt at communication. Jake gripped the command chair's armrest as alien memories flooded his consciousness. Memories of beauty beyond human comprehension and horror that transcended species barriers. Crystal spires reaching toward binary suns, their faceted surfaces, singing in harmonized frequencies that created music from light itself. Beings of living crystal moving through prisms of colored air, their thoughts shared in perfect unity. A civilization built on harmony, where discord was unknown and war was literally unthinkable. Then came the destroyers. The images shifted, becoming darker, more violent. Ships like metallic insects swarming around the crystal world. Weapons that didn't just kill but corrupted, turning the planet's living light into something twisted and wrong. The crystalline beings tried to flee, but there was nowhere to run. One by one, their songs were silenced. My name... The creature's voice broke through the mental barrage, each word carefully formed despite the obvious pain. My name is Lyra. Jake forced himself to focus on the present, though the alien memories still echoed in his mind. Lyra, he repeated, tasting the sound. That's a human name. Learned from your broadcasts. Your music. So beautiful. Reminded me of home. The massive form outside the station shifted, and Jake could see now that what he'd taken for battle damage was actually decorative scarring. Ritual markings that had been deliberately carved into the creature's carapace. I chose name from your constellation. Lyra the Harp, music of stars. Dr. Park stepped forward, her scientific curiosity overriding her fear. Lyra, how long have you been alone? The pause stretched for nearly a minute before the answer came, heavy with centuries of grief. 300 of your years, since the Void Reapers came, since my people died. Void Reapers? Jake exchanged glances with his tactical officer. What are they? The creature, Lyra, shuddered, her crystalline form refracting the station's lights in sharp, painful patterns. Devourers. They feed on life, on light, on joy. Take living worlds and make them empty, cold. They consumed my home, my family, my... The translation faltered as alien concepts overwhelmed human language. My harmony bond. The one who shared my song. Jake felt a chill that had nothing to do with the station's climate control. Where are they now? Coming. Always coming. I have run for so long, but they follow my song. Cannot silence what I am. Cannot stop being what they destroyed. Lyra's voice carried a weight of exhaustion that spoke of decades spent fleeing through the void. I came here because your music, your broadcasts, they reminded me I was not the only one who could sing. The implications hit the bridge crew, like a physical blow. They weren't just dealing with first contact. They were harboring a refugee from a genocidal war. And according to Lyra, her pursuers were still out there. How close are they? Jake asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to know the answer. Close. Days, perhaps weeks. They track my resonance patterns. Lyra's form moved closer to the station, and Jake could see the exhaustion in her movements. I should go. Leave you. Safe. But I am so tired, and your songs... They make the silence bearable. Jake made a decision that would define humanity's place in the galaxy. No, you're not going anywhere. Commander? Torres looked at him as if he'd lost his mind. You're staying here, Lyra, under our protection. Jake stepped closer to the viewer, addressing the alien directly. Humanity doesn't abandon those who ask for help. We've never backed down from bullies, and we're not starting now. The alien's song changed, becoming something brighter, more complex. It took Jake a moment to realize what he was hearing. Laughter. Not human laughter, but the crystalline equivalent. Pure joy given voice. You do not understand, Lyra said when her mirth subsided. The Void Reapers destroyed a civilization that spanned 1,000 worlds. Your single station won't face them alone, Jake interrupted. Computer, open a priority channel to Earth Command. Full encryption. As the communication system activated, Jake looked out at the creature floating beyond their hull. This being who had chosen a human name from human music, who had fled across the galaxy carrying the memories of her murdered people, who, despite everything, still had the capacity for laughter. Time for humanity to meet its first alien friend, he said quietly, and maybe show the galaxy what we do to genocidal monsters. Outside, Lyra's 7 eyes pulsed with something that might have been hope. Admiral Rebecca Stone's face filled the command center's main screen, her expression shifting from skepticism to grim determination as Jake finished his report. Behind her, the Earth Command Operations Center buzzed with activity. Strategists, xenobiologists, and military analysts processing humanity's first real evidence that they weren't alone in the universe. Commander Morrison, let me understand this correctly, Stone said, her voice carrying the weight of her 40 years in space. You've made contact with an alien refugee whose mere presence may draw a genocidal force to our doorstep, and your response was to offer her sanctuary? Yes, ma'am. Jake stood at attention despite the video link. It was the right thing to do. Stone was quiet for a long moment, studying something off-screen. When she looked back, there was something like pride in her eyes. I agree. But the Joint Chiefs are calling for an immediate evacuation of Vega Station and a full military quarantine of the sector. With respect, Admiral, that would be abandoning Lyra to die. It would also protect 3 billion humans on Earth and the colonies. Stone's expression softened slightly. But you know me better than that, Commander. I didn't build my career by running from fights. Jake felt a spark of hope. Rebecca Stone was legendary in the Space Navy. The woman who'd led the Mars Rebellion. Suppression, who'd established humanity's first permanent base beyond the solar system. If anyone would stand and fight, it would be her. What's the official response, ma'am? The official response is that Earth Command is evaluating the situation and will respond appropriately. Stone's smile was sharp as a blade. The unofficial response is that Task Force Prometheus will arrive at your position in 72 hours with everything we can spare. Through the bridge speakers, Lyra's crystalline voice resonated with surprise. You would risk war for one refugee. Stone's eyes shifted to look at something off-screen, presumably where they'd established communication with Lyra. Ma'am, I don't know your people's customs, but humanity has a saying, no one fights alone. We meant it then, and we mean it now. The alien song changed, becoming something richer and more complex. Dr. Park, monitoring the translation matrix, looked up with tears in her eyes. She's singing about honor, about courage. The closest translation would be a hymn of gratitude. Stone nodded approvingly. Lyra, I understand you've been running from these Void Reapers for 3 centuries. What can you tell us about their capabilities? They are efficient killers. Lyra's form shifted outside the station, moving to orient herself toward the communication pickup. Their ships are biomechanical, living metal that heals damage and adapts to weapons. They feed on life energy, growing stronger with each world they consume. My people were pacifists, builders, singers. We had no weapons, no warriors. We fell, in days. But humans aren't pacifists, Jake interjected. We've been fighting wars since before we left our birth world. Admiral, what are we looking at for assets? Stone consulted a tablet. Task Force Prometheus, 6 heavy cruisers, 12 destroyers, 40 fighter squadrons, and 2,000 of our best Marines, plus the new experimental weapons from the Titan research station. Will it be enough? Jake asked. Stone's smile was grim. Probably not, but it's what we have. And sometimes, that has to be enough. She paused, then addressed Lyra directly. How long do we have to prepare? Their hunting pack numbers between 50 and 100 ships. They move slowly but deliberately, consuming any life they encounter along the way. Based on my calculations, 5 days, perhaps 6. The bridge fell silent as the implications sank in. Even with Task Force Prometheus, they'd be outnumbered at least 2 to 1 by an enemy that had spent millennia perfecting the art of xenocide. There is another possibility, Lyra said hesitantly. My people kept records of all we encountered in our exploration of the galaxy. There are other survivors, not many, but some. Scattered refugees like myself, hiding in the dark spaces between stars. Stone leaned forward. Could they help us fight? Some might. If they believe there is hope, if they think the cycle of running can finally end. Lyra's voice carried a note of desperate longing. But they have been alone so long, afraid for so long. They would need proof that this time is different. Jake looked at the tactical display showing their meager defenses, then at Admiral Stone's determined face on the screen. Then we'll give them proof. We'll show them what humanity does when someone threatens our friends. Stone's expression shifted to something that might have been maternal pride. Commander Morrison, you have operational command of Vega Station's defenses. Task Force Prometheus will arrive in 72 hours. Make them count. As the communication ended, Jake turned to look out at Lyra's massive form, her crystalline carapace catching the light of distant stars. For 3 centuries she had run from nightmares, carrying the memories of her dead civilization. But her running was over. "Lyra," he said quietly, "it's time to call your friends. Tell them humanity is here and we're ready to fight." The alien's song rose in pitch, becoming something that transcended species. A battle hymn that spoke of hope reborn and courage shared across the void. The response to Lyra's call exceeded everyone's expectations. They came from the deep void, between stars, from asteroid fields and dead systems where they'd hidden for decades or centuries. Ships that defied human understanding of physics and biology, vessels grown from living metal, craft that seemed to be made of crystallized starlight, and others that appeared to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Jake stood in Vega, station's largest cargo bay, watching as the 7th impossible craft docked with their station. Each arrival brought a new species, survivors of civilizations the Void Reapers had consumed across millennia of galactic destruction. "Commander," Dr. Park's voice crackled through his comm unit, "you need to see this." Jake made his way to the observation deck where Park had set up her xenobiology lab. Through the transparasteel, he could see Lyra's massive form surrounded by the other refugee ships, her crystalline carapace pulsing with complex light patterns. "She's not just communicating," Park explained, pointing to her instruments. "She's conducting those light patterns. They're coordinating the other survivors, helping them overcome decades or centuries of trauma-induced isolation." Through the reinforced window, Jake watched as ship after ship responded to Lyra's signals. Slowly, hesitantly, they began to move in formation. It was like watching broken souls remember how to trust. "How many do we have?" Jake asked. 17 ships so far, representing 11 different species." Park's voice carried wonder and sadness in equal measure. "Jake, some of these beings have been alone since before humans discovered fire. The psychological damage, but they came when she called?" "Yes, they came." The comm system crackled to life with Lyra's translated voice. "Commander Morrison, please join us in the primary conference chamber. There is much to discuss." Jake made his way to Conference Room Alpha, which had been hastily modified to accommodate beings that had never been designed to fit through human-sized doorways. Environmental suits filled with exotic atmospheres, holographic projections, and in one case what appeared to be a sentient pool of liquid metal, surrounded the conference table. Lyra had projected herself as a smaller version of her true form, a being of living crystal roughly human-sized, her 7 eyes now gentle rather than terrifying. "Let me introduce the others," she said, her translated voice warm with something that might have been pride. "These are the last survivors of the Reaper Wars," each being told their story in turn. Keth, whose people had been living metal that flowed between the stars, now the sole survivor of a species that once numbered in the billions. Vera, a energy being whose race had transcended physical form only to find that incorporeal existence offered no protection from the Reaper's hunger. Dav, whose crystalline, silicon-based people had built cities in the hearts of stars before being snuffed out like candles. The pattern was always the same. Advanced civilizations with no concept of warfare. Peaceful species who had never imagined that intelligence could be used for systematic destruction. All had fled. All had hidden. All had survived alone while their entire cultures burned. "For 300 years we have run," Lyra concluded. "Hidden. Waited. Hoped that somehow the Reapers would simply stop. But they never stop. They consume. They adapt. They grow stronger." Jake looked around the table at the assembled refugees, the last representatives of dozens of extinct civilizations. "But you answered Lyra's call. You came here knowing the Reapers would follow." The liquid metal being Flux, he called himself, rippled in what Jake had learned was laughter. "Human commander, we are already dead. Our peoples, our worlds, our futures, all consumed. What more can they take from us?" "Your lives," Jake said simply. "Lives without purpose are not worth preserving." Vera's energy form pulsed with soft light. "But perhaps this time can be different." Keth flowed across the table, his metallic form taking on a roughly humanoid shape. "Tell us of your weapons, human." Tell us of your willingness to die for strangers. Jake activated the holographic display, showing the Task Force Prometheus fleet composition. 6 heavy cruisers, 12 destroyers, 40 fighter squadrons, 2,000 Marines trained for boarding actions, and experimental weapons that might be able to penetrate Reaper defenses. The aliens studied the display with varying degrees of skepticism. Your numbers are small, Dav observed, his crystalline form refracting the hologram's light into prismatic rainbows. Our courage is not, Jake replied. Admiral Stone will be here in 18 hours with everything humanity can spare. We'll fight the Reapers here, at Vega Station. We'll make our stand. And when your fleet is destroyed? Flux asked bluntly. When your weapons prove inadequate? What then? Jake was quiet for a moment, considering his words carefully. Then we'll fight them with our bare hands if we have to, because that's what humans do when someone threatens our friends. The conference chamber fell silent. Jake could feel the weight of millennia-old trauma, the accumulated grief of destroyed civilizations, pressing down on the assembled survivors. Then Lyra began to sing. It started as a low, crystalline note, barely audible, but gradually other voices joined in. Keth's metallic form resonated in harmony. Vera's energy field pulsed in rhythm. One by one, the survivors added their voices to a song that had been silent for centuries. It was a funeral dirge for the dead, a battle hymn for the living, and a prayer for the future, all combined into something that transcended language and species. When the song ended, Jake felt tears on his cheeks. We will fight, Lyra said simply. For the first time in 300 years, we will stand and fight. Outside the station, the Void Reapers continued their inexorable approach, unaware that their prey had finally found allies willing to bare their teeth. Admiral Stone's fleet emerged from hyperspace like avenging angels, their hulls gleaming against the starfield as they took defensive positions around Vega Station. Jake watched from the command center as the 6 heavy cruisers formed a protective wall, their massive forms bristling with weapons designed to crack planet-killer asteroids and reduce hostile stations to scrap metal. Admiral Stone to Vega Station. The comm crackled. Status report. 18 refugee ships standing by. All crew at battle stations, Jake replied. Our guests have shared what intelligence they have on Reaper tactics. Recommend all ships implement dispersal pattern Delta. Acknowledged. All ships, implement dispersal pattern Delta. Stone's voice carried across the fleet channels. This is Admiral Rebecca Stone of the United Earth Coalition. Today we face an enemy that has spent millennia believing itself invincible. Today, we prove them wrong. Through the observation windows, Jake could see the refugee ships moving into formation alongside the human fleet. They made an odd sight. Crystalline vessels that caught starlight like prisms, ships of living metal that flowed like quicksilver, craft that seemed to exist partially in normal space and partially somewhere else entirely. Contact, reported. Lieutenant Torres. Bearing 27 Mark IV, multiple signatures. The tactical display lit up with hostile contacts. Dozens of them, moving in perfect formation through the void. Jake felt his breath catch as he got his first clear look at the Void Reapers. They were beautiful in their horror. Ships that looked grown rather than built, their hulls a dark metal that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Organic, curves suggested biology rather than engineering, and along their sides, bioluminescent patterns pulsed with the rhythm of some vast alien heart. My God, Torres whispered. How many? 67 confirmed contacts, the tactical officer reported. Estimated mass. Commander, some of those ships are larger than our heavy cruisers. Jake opened a channel to all ships. All vessels, this is Commander Morrison. Remember, the Reapers feed on life energy. Stay mobile, stay together, and don't let them get close enough to drain your power cores. The first Reaper ship opened fire, and Jake learned why so many civilizations had fallen to these monsters. The weapon wasn't energy or projectile. It was something far worse. A beam of absolute darkness lanced out from the alien ship, and where it touched the refugee vessel, Starweaver, the living metal hull, simply ceased to exist. Not destroyed, not vaporized, simply gone, as if it had never been. Evasive maneuvers, Jake shouted. All ships, scatter pattern. The battle erupted across three-dimensional space as human and refugee ships broke formation. Particle beams and missile salvos answered the Reaper weapons. But Jake watched in growing horror as shot after shot either missed entirely or simply had no effect on the alien hulls. "Their armor is adaptive," Dr. Park reported from her sensor station. "Every hit teaches them how to defend against that specific weapon type." One of the destroyers, the Defiant, took a direct hit from a Reaper beam. Jake watched the tough little ship simply fade away, taking 200 souls with it into whatever void the Reapers had opened. "Admiral, conventional weapons aren't working," Jake transmitted. "Acknowledged. All ships switch to experimental packages. Authorization code, Stone 77 Alpha." The human ships began firing weapons that shouldn't have existed. Devices reverse-engineered from alien tech found in deep space. Weapons that bent the laws of physics into uncomfortable shapes. Gravity distortion cannons that crushed space-time itself. Quantum disruptors that attacked the fundamental forces holding matter together. The tide began to turn. The first Reaper ship to die did so spectacularly, its adaptive hull failing to compensate for an attack that existed in 11 dimensions simultaneously. The dark metal cracked, revealing something underneath that pulsed with stolen life, the accumulated essence of 1,000 consumed worlds. "They're not just ships," Lyra's translated voice carried over the comm. "They're prisons. Each one contains the life force of entire civilizations." Jake felt sick. How many worlds? Thousands. Maybe tens of thousands. Lyra's massive form weaved between laser blasts, her crystalline body refracting the Reaper's darkness into harmless light. When they die, the stolen souls go free. The battle raged for 3 hours. Human ingenuity met alien malevolence in the space around Vega Station, and slowly, very slowly, the humans began to win. The refugee ships, inspired by humanity's courage, found their own ways to fight back. Keth's liquid metal form expanded to engulf a Reaper ship, dissolving its adaptive armor from within. Vera's energy being companions overloaded Reaper power systems with pure electromagnetic fury. But victory came at a cost. Of Admiral Stone's fleet, only 2 heavy cruisers and 6 destroyers remained functional. Half the refugee ships had been destroyed or disabled. Vega Station itself bore scorch marks from near misses that would have destroyed a lesser facility. "Commander," Torres reported, her voice exhausted. "Sensors show the surviving Reaper ships are withdrawing." Jake looked at the tactical display. 23 Reaper ships limped away from the battle, their dark hulls cracked and leaking the stolen essence of consumed worlds. For the first time in millennia, the Void Reapers had been defeated. "Admiral Stone to all ships," the comm crackled. "Damage reports." As the reports came in, Jake realized they'd done more than win a battle. They'd proven something important. The Reapers weren't invincible. They could be hurt, they could be stopped, and they could be made to run. "Lyra," Jake called out. "Can you contact the other survivors? The ones still hiding?" The alien song filled the comm channels. Not the mournful dirge of the hunted, but something new. A call to arms that rang across the galaxy, carrying a simple message. The age of running was over. The age of fighting back had begun. 6 months after the Battle of Vega Station, Jake Morrison stood in what had once been the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter, watching the most ambitious construction project in human history take shape. Haven Station stretched across 50 kilometers of void, its modular sections growing daily as new refugees arrived to join the Alliance. Human engineering merged with alien technology in ways that shouldn't have been possible. Crystalline computing matrices interfaced with quantum processors, while living metal bulkheads adapted themselves to atmospheric needs Jake couldn't pronounce. "Commander Morrison to Council Chambers," the station's AI announced in a voice that somehow managed to harmonize with itself across multiple frequencies, a gift from Vera's people, who existed as pure energy. Jake made his way through corridors that changed as he walked, the living metal walls adjusting their temperature and lighting to optimize his comfort. Even after 6 months, he still marveled at how quickly the different species had learned to work together. The council chambers had been designed to accommodate beings that had never been meant to share the same space. Lyra attended as a holographic projection, her crystalline form refracting the chamber's light into gentle rainbows. Keth flowed across the floor in his liquid metal form, while Vera manifested as a stable energy field that pulsed with thoughtful blue light. But they weren't alone anymore. Word of the victory at Vega Station had spread across the galaxy faster than anyone had thought possible. Species that had hidden for centuries emerged from their refuges, drawn by the impossible hope that the Void Reapers could actually be defeated. The Architects, a silicon-based species that built cities in the hearts of gas giants, had arrived 3 weeks ago with ship forges capable of constructing entire fleets. The Gardeners, who cultivated life on dead worlds, brought bioweapons that could turn the Reapers' own adaptive nature against them. Even the mysterious Deep Singers, who existed in the quantum foam between dimensions, had sent representatives. "The latest intelligence reports," announced Admiral Stone, who now commanded the Alliance Defense Force from her flagship anchored near Haven Station. "Reaper activity has decreased by 40% across 17 sectors. They're consolidating their forces." Jake studied the holographic star map that dominated the chamber's center. Red markers showed known Reaper concentrations, while blue markers indicated Alliance assets. The pattern was clear. After millennia of unchallenged expansion, the Reapers were pulling back to defend their core territories. "They're afraid," Lyra observed, her translated voice carrying wonder. "For the first time in their existence, they face an enemy that learns from each battle, that grows stronger through cooperation rather than consumption." Dav, whose crystalline form had grown more complex since joining the Alliance, created a smaller hologram within the main display. "My people's archives contained references to the Reaper's origin. They were once a single species, one that chose consumption over creation when their homeworld was dying. They remade themselves into weapons of pure hunger." "Can they be reasoned with?" asked Captain Lisa Park, who had been promoted to head the Alliance's Xenobiology division. "No." Keth's liquid form rippled with certainty. "I have seen their ships from within. There is nothing left that could be called individual consciousness. They are hunger given form, nothing more." Jake looked around the chamber at the assembled representatives of dozens of species, survivors who had found hope in humanity's refusal to abandon a single refugee. "Then we finish what we started at Vega Station." Admiral Stone activated a new display showing fleet compositions and battle plans. "Operation Starlight will commence in 30 days. 300 ships from 47 species, using combined technologies that shouldn't be possible. We're going to hit them where they're strongest, their primary feeding grounds in the Andromeda approach." The plan was audacious beyond reason. Instead of fighting defensively, the Alliance would take the battle to the Reaper's core territories, using humanity's talent for warfare combined with technologies that bent reality itself. "There's something else," Jake said, calling up a personnel file. "We've been monitoring communications from the inner systems. There are more humans who want to join the Alliance. Entire colonies volunteering to help with the refugee resettlement programs." Vera's energy form pulsed with what Jake had learned was amusement. "Your species has a remarkable talent for making friends with beings that terrify them." "Fear and respect aren't mutually exclusive," Jake replied. "And neither are different and valuable." As the meeting wound down and the various representatives returned to their duties, Lyra's projection lingered. Her 7 eyes studied Jake with something that might have been gratitude. "You know," she said quietly, "when I first approached Vega Station, I was preparing to die. 300 years of running, of hiding, of watching the galaxy grow darker. I had given up hope that anything could stop them." Jake moved closer to her projection, remembering that first terrifying moment when she had emerged from the asteroid field like a living nightmare. "What changed your mind?" "You did." Her crystalline form shifted, light patterns playing across her translucent surface. "Not just you personally, but what you represented. When your species saw a monster approaching your station, you could have destroyed me easily. Your weapons were more than sufficient. Instead, you listened. You were asking for help. Yes, but so had others, hundreds of others over the centuries. And they were ignored, or worse." Lyra's voice carried the weight of old pain. "Your people saw past the fear to the person beneath. That's something the Reapers cannot understand or adapt to. They see only prey or predator. They cannot conceive of someone choosing to help a stranger. Jake looked out through the chamber's vast windows at Haven Station's bustling docks, where human cargo handlers worked alongside beings of living light to unload supplies for the latest group of refugees. Children from a dozen different species played together in the station's parks, their laughter creating harmonies that no single species could produce alone. The Reapers made one critical error, he said. They assumed that because they destroyed civilizations individually, they could never face them collectively. And now? Jake smiled, watching as a human engineer collaborated with one of the architects to design new shield generators, their impossible cooperation creating technologies that neither species could develop alone. Now they're about to learn what happens when the galaxy's survivors stop running and start working together. 3 weeks later, the Alliance fleet departed Haven Station in the largest coordinated military action in galactic history. 300 ships from 47 species, their combined technologies creating weapons and defenses that challenged the fundamental laws of physics. At the fleet's heart, Lyra's massive crystalline form moved alongside Admiral Stone's flagship, her 7 eyes burning with something that had been absent for 3 centuries: hope. Around them, the ships of refugees and humans alike prepared to end a reign of terror that had lasted millennia. The age of the Void Reapers was ending. The age of the Alliance had begun, and at its foundation lay a simple truth that Jake Morrison had understood from the very beginning. Sometimes the most monstrous appearance hides the most human heart, and sometimes all it takes to change the galaxy is one person willing to listen to a stranger's song. The stars themselves seemed to sing as the fleet jumped to hyperspace, carrying with them the hopes of 1,000 dead civilizations and the promise of a future where no one would have to run alone through the dark. In the end, everyone had feared the beast, but Jake Morrison had seen the woman within, and in seeing her, had helped the galaxy remember what it meant to be truly alive. End of story.